Hello, welcome back to the Arturia Synthi tutorial series. This original synth was called the Synthi AKS, a second generation synth after the Synthi A, and the KS stands for keyboard sequencer. It's this thing down here. And this was 1972, one of the very first digital sequencer units in the world. This was absolutely pioneering stuff from these guys. They really knocked it out of the park. By today's standards, and the manual peppers like warnings all over the place saying it's a little bit crude, don't expect too much of it. But I think it's kind of cool just to have, the original thing at our fingertips. Let's see what it can do. We're going to put it in record mode, and it's now record armed, it's ready to go. And it's waiting for input from the keyboard. So you don't have to sync up to it inherently. The first moment we press a key, it's going to fire up. And the speed at which it's going to operate is controlled by this sequence length knob here. So you can see it's set to 1.16 seconds. That's how long the entire sequence is going to last for. What you'll also see, in fact, I'll press one note on the keyboard and get it up and running. There we go. Now we can see these four lights cycling around, and it's in mix mode. So every new key that I press is going to add an extra note into this sequence. It's a 256 event sequencer, so advanced, really impressive. So every new key that I play is going to add into that sequence. Now, two things. Firstly, I didn't play it particularly well, but secondly, you're hearing the same note over and over again. That's because, shut up, I've not mapped the sequencer's output to modulate the oscillator's frequency. So here we're operating on oscillator 1. So if I map the sequencer to oscillator 1's frequency modulation, and now we get the notes that I played, and we're still in record mode here, it's still going round and round. I can leave it running as long as I like. Every new note that I play is going to get added to that sequence. It's really hard not to start doing a kind of Baba Riley thing at some point. It's just... So that will just keep on going over and over again until it reaches its 256 event limit. Now, all of those timing issues came about because it's in freeform mode. And of course, when the synth was originally invented, that's what you got. You got a standalone synthesizer in a briefcase, but we can sync it to our host tempo, and that makes it much easier to control, as I'll try to demonstrate now. So the way we're going to do that is record using Cubase rather than actually inputting the notes manually. I've got a little 1-bar part set up here, which I'm going to record into the synthesizer. Now, if I press play as things stand, you're going to hear a bit of a cacophony. I'll do it and we'll talk about why we're hearing what we're hearing. So because I put the sequencer in sync mode, it's waiting to receive play instructions from the host, and as soon as it does, then the sequencer fires up. So it starts playing immediately. If I put it back in free mode and press play, then the sequencer doesn't trigger. So what we're going to do is put it in sync mode, turn record on, and press play. And that's it. That's all it took. As soon as it's got 1 bar of data in its sequence, because our sequence length is currently set to 1 bar, that will now play that sequence back as soon as I press the play button. So that's just playing this sequence now. But we can go back to freeform mode. So it will always stretch that sequence out to play over the length of time that I specify. In addition to being able to stretch and compress time, we can also stretch and compress pitch. And that's dealt with these knobs over here. So we've got independent controls for the sequence and for the keyboard. So if I just play a simple octave on the keyboard and then start messing, so that's at 5.5. The keyboard's like center position is 5.5. As soon as I start turning that knob down, I'll play the same octave. So you've got independent pitch spread controls of the keyboard and the sequencer. Now, this is something that you need to know about, because all of these controls in the keyboard sequencer are active all the time. I've got this sequencer set in freeform mode here with nothing on, it's not playing, and yet I'm affecting the keyboard pitch. I'll just get these centered again. Similarly with the envelope shaper, if I disengage the keyboard envelope shaper, see it's currently set to both, so the envelope shaper is applying to both the keyboard and the sequencer. If I set that to sequence only mode, now there is no envelope shaper, and so we're not going to hear any sound. If I have it on keyboard only mode and press play, we don't hear the sequence because the sequence isn't attached to the envelope generator anymore. There, back in both, we've got it. Let's get a new one up and running. We'll go back to free mode, why not? So get your first note up, and that gives you some idea of the timing. Now, instead of inputting keys from the keyboard, I'll click this big friendly random button, which literally outputs a random control voltage. Just going to record one last sequence to show you the next feature. What I'm going to do now is map the sequencer's control voltage to the filter frequency. So now the different octave ranges that I'm playing on the keyboard, every note has its own control voltage value. Those control voltages are translating into modulations of the filter frequency. So I played a wider range of octave notes so you could hear it really clearly. But the point being that this sequencer is just a control voltage output, just like any other. You know, anything in this pin matrix, we said this in episode 1, anything can be plugged into anything. So here we've got the sequencer acting as a control voltage output being fed into the filter frequency, but you could send it absolutely wherever you want. So it's admittedly a historical oddity, but it's a cool one. I like playing with it. And to think that the likes of Jean-Michel Jarre were playing with these in 1975, 1976, that's kind of cool. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please consider subscribing, hit notifications, and you'll be sure not to miss the next episode. Thanks very much.